Hi, I'm Hannah. I thought I was just showing up to say goodbye, to leave a flower, whisper a memory, and walk away. But then my dad pushed me down the cemetery stairs and said, "You still stink." They sent fake sympathy cards. They erased my name from the family tree. They called me the stain. And when I uncovered what they did behind closed doors, that's when everything unraveled. But why did they go that far? Just to make me disappear. The first thing I noticed was the wind. It wasn't violent, not even harsh, but it carried the kind of cold that seeped in behind your collar, settled between your ribs. The cemetery gates creaked slightly as I pushed them open, the kind of noise that felt more like memory than metal. I hadn't been back to Bozeman in over 5 years. The town still smelled like pine and diesel. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. Familiar buildings with new paint, signs with brighter colors, people who didn't look at me long enough to realize who I was. The cemetery hadn't changed. Sunrise Hill sat on the edge of the town like a secret. Grandpa always said cemeteries were where the living finally learned to shut up. He'd laugh, light his pipe, and tilt his chair back like he didn't owe the world a thing. I walked slow. There was no rush, just me, the gravel underfoot, and one parked car near the edge. Dark windows, engine still warm. I didn't think much of it, not yet. When I reached the grave, I stopped. The marker was simple, gray, his full name carved in serif letters, the kind Grandpa liked. Nothing fancy, just true. Flowers were there. Fresh. I didn't recognize the arrangement. I bent down and brushed off some leaves, then pinned the brass compass to my coat, the one he gave me the last time I saw him. "So you always know when to turn around," he'd said. Funny how that stuck more than any of the Bible verses they carved into the stones around him. I stood there in silence for a while before the memory came back. Not a warm one. No candlelit room, no hug at the door. Just a plain envelope in my mailbox 2 weeks ago, no return address. A neighbor must have sent it. Inside, a printed memorial program. And an invitation card, my name crossed out in red ink. It wasn't just crossed out. Someone had dug into the paper with the pen, the kind of angry mark you make when you want someone to feel it. Not just deleted, erased with intention. I didn't cry. I didn't even get mad right away. I just heard his voice in my head, like it always showed up when I needed it. When someone shuts the door, don't bang on it. Build your own damn house. Easier said than done, Grandpa. I sank to my knees and placed my hand on the stone. It was cool, rough, and steadier than any person I'd known lately. "I got the job at the clinic, Grandpa," I whispered. "Missoula's all right. Small apartment, good people. Still single, in case you're keeping score." I chuckled softly. He would have asked. "I still don't know why they hate me, but I miss you anyway." I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the cold to creep into my sleeves, long enough to forget the car parked behind me. "You've got nerve showing up here." His voice hadn't changed. I didn't turn right away. I knew who it was. That tone. The way it cut through everything around it. Like the world had no right to be quiet when he had something to say. When I finally looked up, my father was standing 10 feet away, hands in pockets, shoulders square, same damn coat he always wore to funerals and court dates. "You were never family," he spat. "You still stink of shame." My breath caught, not out of fear, but the realization that I'd actually believed time could soften a man like him. He didn't yell, he didn't raise his hand, just said it like he was reading a label on a box he never ordered. He looked down at the headstone, shook his head. "He wouldn't want you here." And then he walked away. No pause, no demand, no second glance, just walked back to his car and pulled the door shut behind him. I didn't chase after him, didn't argue. My hands were still cold when I reached for the flowers, fixing the ones he'd kicked. The dirt looked newer where his boots had dug in. "I'm not here for you," I whispered. I knelt down again and unclasped the compass pin from my coat. Held it in my palm for a moment, letting its weight settle, then placed it gently at the base of the headstone. "I'll find my direction," I said. "Just not here." As I walked back toward the gate, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my cousin. "Heard you showed up. Big mistake." I didn't fall hard, but I stayed down for a second longer than I needed to, Knees on cold gravel, hands scraped. The wind pushed my coat open as if even it wanted to expose me. I didn't scream, didn't even grunt. I just stared at the base of the headstone, his name carved clean while mine felt carved out of everyone else's mouths. I pushed myself up, slow, deliberate. My palms left faint streaks of dirt on my jeans. My coat was torn at the elbow. The compass pin had a new scratch across the brass, but it stayed pinned. So did I. A couple stood near the far row, watching. They didn't say anything. They never do. Dad was already gone. That's how he did things. Quick to cut, quicker to disappear. Of course he'd push, I muttered. That's what he's always done, just not with hands before. I dusted myself off and walked out of the cemetery the same way I came in, alone. Back at the motel, I peeled off my coat and dropped it on the chair. The sleeve caught the edge, slumped down like it had given up. I opened my phone. There it was, Melissa's name lighting up with a new message, a screenshot from the family group chat. "They didn't expect you," her caption said. Nothing else. In the screenshot, I wasn't tagged. They never tag me. She always shows up when no one wants her. This day was meant to be peaceful. She makes everything about her. Not one of them wrote my name, just she. Her. Like I was a curse word nobody wanted to say out loud. I stared at it longer than I should have, but it didn't shock me. Not anymore. I'd become the shadow at every event, the echo of a problem they'd decided to outlive. And if you say someone's name long enough, it means they matter. If you don't, they disappear. I got the message. I set the phone down, but the words stayed. Replayed. Mixed in with his voice from earlier, his spit-laced, teeth-tight line, "You still stink." It wasn't about me smelling bad. It never was. It was the same damn sentence he used the day I moved out, 10 years ago. Standing in the doorway, trash bags in both hands, no suitcase, no hugs, just that line tossed at me like garbage. "You still stink." I carried that with me longer than I carried anything else from that house. It stuck to my skin, settled in my bones. Even after new jobs, new cities, new lives, those 3 words stayed like mildew in the walls you can't see. I walked to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and stared into the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch, but something in me cracked. A small, tired voice said, "Don't let him write this ending." So I called Mom. Once, twice. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What would I even say? "Hey, Mom." He shoved me again, only this time with his hands. I scrolled down to Angelica's name, stared at it, hovered over the contact, and then deleted it. Not blocked, not ignored. Deleted. Like she'd done to me for years, only now I got to do it back. A memory bubbled up without warning. Angelica, leaning over my shoulder after Dad had exploded over nothing, whispering, "You know how he is. Why poke the bear?" I used to think that was wisdom. Now, it sounded like surrender dressed up as grace. I wasn't poking the bear. I was waking up. Back on the motel bed, I picked up the compass pin, ran my thumb over the new scratch. That thing had seen more war than me, and it still pointed north. Maybe I needed to follow suit. I reached for my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim room. I typed in the county records site, searched obituaries, found Grandpa's, filed last week. Beneath it, a link to the probate summary. I clicked. Scanned. No mention of me. I hit print, took the elevator down to the lobby, grabbed the pages from the front desk printer, and sat back on the edge of my bed. Red pen. Right in the margins. Not even a line. Not even a lie. I didn't know what I wanted yet. Not money, not revenge, but something inside me, quiet but firm, said this couldn't be it. This couldn't be how it ended. So I booked a meeting at the county probate office for the next day. Not for closure, not even for answers, for clarity. I looked back at the compass one more time, resting on the pillow beside me. "You knew I'd get lost," I whispered. "You just didn't know how bad." I didn't sleep. Not really. The motel sheets might as well have been paper. The ceiling felt like it was watching me more than the other way around. I gave up sometime before dawn and opened my old photo app, the one I hadn't touched in years. Scrolling, I found a birthday photo from when I was 10. There was a cake, frosting smeared on the table, and a hand, my mother's, cut perfectly at the wrist. The part of the photo where I should have been was gone, cropped clean. You'd think it was just a slip, but she was always precise with pictures, organized, tidy. I went back to a Facebook post from a cousin, new photo, same hand, same frame, same ghost where I should have been. They didn't delete me, I whispered. They replaced me with silence. The clock on the nightstand ticked like it wanted to be heard. Each second felt like a door closing. I called my mother again. Voicemail. Texted her. Can we talk? Nothing. The screen stayed blank. She used to say, "Don't stir the pot," like truth was a thing you only used if it didn't cause a mess. I remembered a dinner at the old house, round table, roast beef, that heavy silence when I asked about Grandpa's will. My father gave me that look, the one that said, "Be quiet or be gone." And my mother? She just took another bite, never even lifted her head. When they go quiet long enough, you start writing the story yourself. And it never ends well. I stared at the screen for a while. Then it lit up again. Melissa. A direct message. Angie said you'd probably show up to make a scene. I said you'd just come for Grandpa. That line sat in my chest like sour milk. Make a scene. I wasn't dramatic growing up. I just asked questions they didn't want to answer. Melissa added, "They think you left on purpose, like you didn't want this life." I typed, "They built a life I was never invited into." And that was the truth. They'd made it without me, not because I was too far, but because I saw too much. I got dressed and walked down to the cafe 2 blocks from the motel, needed coffee, needed air that hadn't been poisoned by text threads and old photos. The door chimed behind me as I walked in. And there she was, Mrs. Danvers, high school English, hard as nails, but fair. She looked older, softer somehow. She looked up and smiled like she'd been expecting me. Now there's a face I haven't seen in years. I managed to smile, sat at the counter beside her. "You still writing?" she asked. "Here and there," I said, "not for anyone." "You used to write essays like arrows, always aiming at truth." We sat in silence for a few sips. Then she said it. "You always had to earn what they gave for free to others." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. That sentence was the first time anyone outside my head had ever named the thing that followed me everywhere. The thing that made every family photo feel like a courtroom sketch. I left the cafe feeling heavier, but more certain. Like the weight had a name now. Back in the room, I pulled out the one thing I still kept from high school, a framed photo of me and Grandpa from graduation. I hadn't looked at it in a while, dust along the corners, glass a little cracked. I turned it over. Behind the frame, tucked between the cardboard backing and the wood, was an envelope, yellowed, sealed. I opened it. "Elora, no matter what they say, you are part of this family because you never asked for anything. That's what makes you worthy." The pen was his, the signature barely legible, like his hands had already started to fail him. My chest tightened. He wrote this long before the split, long before they erased me. I touched the paper like it was a shoulder, kissed the top edge and whispered, "You remembered." Even when they didn't. I stood up, wiped the frame with my sleeve, and set it down on the desk. Then I packed my bag, printed the will again from the motel computer, and folded it into my coat pocket. Time to find what else they buried. It was just past 9 when I walked through the courthouse doors. No drama, no announcement, just the click of my boots on the tile and the tired look from the clerk at the front counter. I gave her my name. She asked for ID, then handed me the file. No emotion, no apology, just a manila folder that felt heavier than it should. I took a seat in the far corner where nobody else would bother with me and opened it. My name wasn't there. Angelica was listed as the sole heir, sole executor, sole caretaker of legacy. That phrase, caretaker of legacy, hit harder than I expected. Not because of money, not even because of status, but because I knew what it really meant in our family. It meant you got to control the story. I was the one who stayed with him, I whispered to no one. I changed his oxygen tanks. I helped him bathe when he was too proud to ask. And now I was just nothing. I folded the file shut, fingers tight around the edge, and walked out before the heat in my face turned into something worse. A few hours later, I drove past the old house. Only it wasn't the old house anymore. The white siding had been redone. There was a sign now. Oak's Legacy House, preserving history, honoring family. I parked across the street, watched people take selfies in front of the porch. School kids running around with pamphlets. Some woman in a sun hat telling a group, he was a real Bozeman legend, a man of duty, a man of family. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just crossed the street, stepped inside, and acted like a tourist. Photos of Dad in uniform lined the front hall. Angelica in nearly every shot. Mayor shaking hands, ribbons, awards. Not a single mention of Grandpa. In the living room, I found it, under glass, a watch. Grandfather's watch, gifted to Angelica on her 16th birthday. It was mine. I knew it because the engraving on the inside read E.G. I still had the handwritten card he gave me that day, tucked into an old journal. That watch was a promise, a bridge between us, and now it was theirs. I snapped a photo, whispered, even the objects got reassigned. Later that night, back at the motel, Melissa sent another message. No greeting, no explanation, just a screenshot from the family group chat. She'll try to claim stuff, just ignore her. She was always the stain. That word sat on my screen like a cigarette burn. Stain, not a misfit, not a black sheep, a stain. And the worst part? It wasn't new. I remembered spilling coffee once at a holiday dinner, maybe 15, 16 years old, ruined the tablecloth. My uncle made a joke, something like, well, there's the stain again. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But it never stopped. It wasn't a joke. It was a title, a role. I locked the phone and set it down. I didn't cry. I didn't break. But my jaw clenched so tight it felt like something inside me had to crack to make room for whatever came next. The next morning, I needed air, coffee, something. I ended up back at the same cafe where I'd run into Mrs. Danvers. Only this time, it wasn't her I saw. It was Angelica, sitting at the back corner table with a local councilman, laughing like she hadn't spent the last week rewriting history, like she belonged to something holy. I didn't interrupt, didn't stomp in, didn't cause a scene. I waited, and when I saw her pick up her phone, I walked past their table, calm, measured, and dropped the probate file right in front of her. One post-it stuck to the cover. Thanks for taking everything but the truth. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. I left the cafe without coffee. Didn't need it anymore. I had heat enough in my chest. Back in my motel room, I laid everything out on the bed like pieces of a crime scene. The will, the photo of the watch. The screenshot from the group chat, the card from Grandpa, folded and yellowed but still whole. I opened my laptop, started a new draft. Subject line, formal objection, estate misrepresentation. I didn't send it, not yet. I just stared at the cursor blinking on the blank page. They made me the stain so they could stay spotless, I whispered. And for the first time, I felt like the ink on the page was mine. They said it would be a celebration of his life, a public remembrance, something for the community. But the minute I walked into that hall, I knew it was staged. Rows of folding chairs, cheap coffee in cardboard dispensers, posters printed in color, remembering Alden Oaks Sr. like a campaign slogan. I stood in the back, not because I wanted to hide, but because I already knew they'd written me out of the script. The slideshow began, Grandpa and Angelica smiling on the front porch, Grandpa at the local parade with the mayor, Grandpa holding baby photos, none of which were me, not a single frame, not one accidental shot. They had scrubbed me so clean, it was like I had never drawn breath in his presence. People smiled, clapped softly, wiped tears. I didn't. I walked to the condolence table, pretending to look at the flowers. Then I opened the book. Pages of names, condolences from the mailman, the butcher, the bank teller. Strangers who knew my grandfather by name, not blood. I flipped near the back and found it. One line. Too bad family shame like her still shows up. It wasn't signed. Didn't need to be. That sentence had fingerprints all over it. Not literal, but history. Generational. I stared at it. Didn't blink. I knew if I did, my eyes might sting. Then I saw her. Across the room, seated in a wheelchair, was Grandma. She looked smaller than I remembered. Smaller than last Christmas, even. Time had shrunk her frame, but not her eyes. They locked on mine, sharp and wet. She raised a shaky hand. Just slightly, just enough. I walked toward her. Slow. Measured. Halfway there, my cousin tried to block me. "Let her be," she hissed. "She's tired." But Grandma waved her off, kept her eyes on me. When I leaned down, her voice was barely air. "Don't let them write you out, baby," she said. "They already tried with me." My breath hitched. "What do you mean?" Her fingers gripped mine with surprising strength. "Back when I questioned your grandpa about money, they said I was unstable, told folks I was forgetful. They erased my say. Now they're doing it to you." She gave a weak smile. Not joyful, just knowing. I tried to say something, but the moment broke before I could. Angelica appeared like clockwork, lipstick perfect, voice low. "Mom, it's time to go. You look exhausted." Grandma looked at me one last time, then nodded. Like we had a secret now. I let them wheel her away. And I stood still until the chairs started folding and the people started leaving. Later that evening, I sat in my motel room. No lights on except the glow from the bathroom. A memory hit me like cold water. I was maybe 16, hiding behind the hallway wall, listening to my parents argue. "She's too sensitive, Alden," my mother said. "Not everyone's made for this family." He scoffed. "Then she won't be part of it." Let her cry elsewhere. I didn't cry that night, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I realized something. Silence in our house wasn't failure, it was punishment. The next morning, I waited outside the community center, knowing she'd show. She always did her victory laps after public events. Angelica walked out alone. Spotted me. Didn't flinch. We stared at each other like two people who used to be sisters. Maybe never were. "Why was I cut from the slideshow?" I asked. She tilted her head, half smile. "Because you cut yourself out years ago." I didn't even blink. "No, I was cut. You just never handed me scissors." She smiled wider, turned, and walked off. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. I watched her go, hand resting over my coat pocket. The compass was still there. I kept it close. That night, I sat at the desk in my room and opened a new document. Started writing everything. Not a memoir, not a story, a record. Every name, every date, every omission. I printed out the photo of the guest book, the sentence that said I was shame, the slideshow photos, the messages, the file with my name missing. Then I looked in the mirror, not to see what they saw, but to see what they didn't. "They built their legacy on quiet," I whispered. "I'll tear it down with truth." The silence in my chest finally cracked. I didn't go out that night, didn't eat, didn't shower, just sat on the edge of the motel bed with my shoes still on, staring at the pile of documents I'd collected over the past week. The will, the scan from the guest book, the messages, the photo of the watch, my grandmother's whisper still ringing somewhere behind my ribs. Maybe they won. That thought crept in slower than I expected. It wasn't loud, just persistent, like fog under a door. I deleted the draft email, the one that had all the truth typed out, waiting to be sent, gone with a single click, just like they had done with me. The compass pin sat on the nightstand, scratched and dull. For a second, I thought about throwing it away, but instead, I left it there. Still mine. Still proof. Then came the knock. It wasn't frantic, just 3 short taps. I opened the door and found Lavender Doe standing there. Cemetery groundskeeper, the only man in town who looked like he didn't need permission to be kind. He held up a small USB drive. I wasn't supposed to show you this, he said. But I saw what he did. This belongs to you more than it belongs to them. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside so he could walk in. He didn't. Watch it, he said. Then do whatever you think is right. I closed the door and plugged it into my laptop. No sound, just muted footage from the cemetery. I watched myself at the grave, then I watched my father appear, then his hand, then the shove. I leaned in, watched again. Slower. The way he looked at me, like I was a problem to be solved, not a person to be remembered. I closed the laptop. It wasn't about pain anymore. It was about direction. The next day, I drove across town to return a borrowed phone charger to my cousin's place. She wasn't home, but her daughter, Angelica's little girl, answered the door. She looked up at me with that mixture of curiosity and caution kids always carry when they've overheard more than they should. I saw your picture in Grandpa's room, she said. I smiled softly. Did you? Mommy said you used to be someone else. I crouched to her level. I'm still her. She looked around, then leaned in, like sharing a secret. Why did everyone look away at the memorial? I didn't answer right away. Because sometimes, when kids ask the simplest questions, they accidentally drag the entire truth out from where we've hidden it. Because sometimes, I said, people don't know how to face what they've erased. She nodded, like that made perfect sense, then closed the door gently behind her. Her words stayed with me all night. That was the moment I stopped thinking about revenge. It wasn't about getting even. It was about making sure what happened to me didn't happen to the next one. That afternoon, I drove to the church annex. They were hosting a follow-up tea for the memorial. Cake, coffee, polite laughter. I kept to the back, didn't speak, just observed. On one bulletin board near the refreshments table, they'd put together a collage titled Grandpa's Life, photos of him fishing, him with Dad, him with Angelica at City Hall. And then, tucked in the corner, almost hidden, me, 10 years old, sitting on his lap, hand on the compass pin, the same one now resting in my motel room. I stared at that photo long enough to memorize the crease in the corner. Someone didn't get the memo to erase me. I took a picture. Didn't say a word. That night, I sat in my car outside Angelica's house. I didn't knock. Didn't want a confrontation. I pulled an envelope from the passenger seat and double-checked its contents. A copy of the cemetery footage, a printout of the will, the photo of the bulletin board, and one line handwritten across the top. Erase me one more time, and I'll erase the lie completely. I added one last thing to the envelope before taping it to her front door. The compass pin. Not a keepsake. A warning. The card came without a return address. Tucked in between a pile of real estate flyers and junk mail, it looked harmless. Soft, cream-colored envelope, silver trim, the kind you'd see at a baby shower or retirement party. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. Inside, "We're sorry you couldn't make it. We know it must have been hard, but we understand your choice." It wasn't signed, but I knew exactly who it came from. They wanted people to think I skipped the funeral, that I made a scene by not showing up, that I abandoned the very man I spent years caring for in private while they prepped speeches and photo collages. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was framing. Same tactic they used back when I was 15, and Dad claimed my history teacher called about my attitude. Turns out, no one ever called, but by the time I asked, the story was too well set, too useful. I folded the card in half and placed it on the desk next to the other files. This wasn't neglect. This was design. That evening, I dug through my travel bag to pull out my journal, the same one I'd thrown in last minute, stuffed with receipts and old appointment slips. In the middle of the notebook, hidden between two grocery lists, was a sealed envelope I hadn't touched since before Grandpa died. My name was on the front, his handwriting. My fingers shook opening it, not because I was afraid, because part of me still didn't believe I mattered enough to be remembered in ink. Inside was one sentence. Don't let the ones who shout define the story. You were the quiet strength. No long explanation. No apology for the rest of them, just clarity. I read it 3 more times. It wasn't a roadmap. It was permission. I placed the letter in a folder marked Final, then zipped the bag shut. I wasn't the outcast anymore. I was the one holding the matches. Next morning, I walked into the Bozeman Gazette without an appointment. The office smelled like printer ink and burnt coffee. A younger guy at the front recognized me. "I was in your writing workshop," he said. "Senior year, you remember?" I nodded. "Still writing?" "Trying to." I slid the folder across the counter. He opened it, scanned, flipped, slowed down. "The will," I said. "The footage. A letter. And those," I pointed to the printouts from the family group chat, "are what they said about me when they thought no one was listening." He looked up. "You're ready for war?" "No," I said. "I'm ready for correction." He smiled, not like a friend, but like a man who just found a story. "We'll be in touch." 2 days later, I stopped by the public library. They'd just installed a new community board in the lobby, title across the top in bold blue letters, "Our Local Legacy." I stood still in front of it, clippings from the Gazette, photos from the memorial. A huge shot of Angelica shaking hands with the mayor, captioned, "The Oaks family, past and present." Underneath, a quote, "We carry our history proudly." I pulled an envelope from my coat pocket, pinned it beside the mayor's smile. Inside, a QR code linking to the cemetery footage, a copy of Grandpa's letter, and one handwritten line, "History isn't heritage when the truth is missing." Then I left. Quietly. Later that night, back in the motel, my phone buzzed. It was the reporter. "We're running your counterpiece. Unfiltered. Are you sure?" I typed back, "Yes. I've been quiet long enough." Then I opened my voice recorder. Not to yell, not to rant, just to say it clean. "My name is Alora. I was erased, edited, reduced. But I never disappeared. I carried my family in silence because I thought it was loyalty. Turns out it was just a good way for them to build a lie without interruption." I paused. Let the silence have a beat. They took the front page. "I'll take the footnotes, because they last longer." I sent it. Then, for the first time in weeks, I slept. The email came just after sunrise. No subject, no signature, just a file named Listen MP3 and a single line, "You deserve to hear it for yourself." I didn't hesitate. I clicked play. His voice filled the room. My father's. No room for doubt, no background noise, no distortion. "She's out. She's not family anymore. As far as I'm concerned, she never existed." I sat there, completely still, not shocked, not even angry at first, just still, like someone had pulled the air out of the room and all that was left was weight. I listened again. He didn't stutter, didn't pause, just erased me, with complete ease. That was the moment I realized something. It hadn't been about grief, or loyalty, or even inheritance. It was about narrative, control, erasure. And I was done letting it happen. I forwarded the file, first to the Gazette reporter, then to the local archives, and finally to the town clerk's office. No subject, no commentary. Let the record reflect what they said when they thought no one would hear. Later that afternoon, I pulled into a long gravel driveway lined with dormant lilacs and plastic gnomes. Mrs. Kavanaugh, our family's longtime housekeeper, opened the door before I could knock. "Figured it'd be you," she said. "Come in." We sat at her kitchen table. She poured coffee without asking, cream and sugar already in. Then she slid a small envelope across the table, the kind Grandpa used for birthday cards. Heavy paper, neat penmanship. "He gave this to me a week before he passed," she said. "Told me to wait, said, only if they start rewriting things." I opened it. It was an earlier version of his will. Signed, stamped, dated, and in it, my name, listed as executor, as heir, as family. There was also a note at the bottom, scrawled in shaky ink. "Only she never asked for anything, so she deserves it most." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stared at it. Held it like a fragile truth that finally had weight. "This is what scared them," I said. Mrs. Kavanaugh nodded. and she was right. The next day, I walked into the Oaks Legacy house for the first time in years. The house didn't smell like it used to. It smelled like brochures and bleach. Everything felt curated, sanitized. The main hall featured a new exhibit, a giant family tree painted across the wall in elegant cursive, names traced down from great-grandparents, lines connecting siblings, spouses, children. My name was gone. In its place, a small asterisk with a typed note beneath it. Estranged relative, no longer part of the Oaks line. A tour guide walked by, noticed me staring. "We were told to say she chose to leave," she said, hushed. "Just so there's no confusion." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "I wasn't lost," I said. "I was erased." Then I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. I didn't cause a scene, but I did leave with proof. 2 nights later, at the Town Hall Forum, the place was packed. The agenda item, continued funding for the Oaks Legacy House. The board opened the floor for public comment. I stood up. The mic buzzed as I adjusted it. "I wasn't invited," I said, "but I am here." I held up a small speaker, tapped play. The audio played clearly. "She's out. She's not family anymore. As far as I'm concerned, she never existed." The room went silent. Then came a few gasps. I unfolded the will, read my name aloud, read Grandpa's note. Then I looked at Angelica and Alden. They didn't move. The board exchanged glances. Whispers started. Papers shifted. I looked at them one more time. Legacies built on lies should never be funded by truth. I stepped away. Outside, I walked toward the riverbank behind the courthouse. Same place Grandpa used to take me when I was a kid. I reached into my coat pocket. The compass pin sat in my hand, cold, worn. I held it for a long moment. Then let it fall into the river. Not in anger, not as surrender, but as closure. My phone buzzed. A podcast producer. "We'd love to have you on. Tell your side." I replied, "I've already said enough. Let them say the rest." Then I looked up at the sky. Let my breath go slow. The truth was out. My silence was done. But peace, real peace, was finally starting. A few weeks passed after the town forum, long enough for the noise to die down, for the article to stop circulating, for the phone to stop buzzing with strangers calling me brave. That word never sat right with me. I didn't feel brave. I felt finished. I walked alone through a field at the edge of Bozeman one morning where the grass was dry and brittle underfoot. The same place I used to go with Grandpa when we needed air or distance. The sun wasn't up yet, not fully, just a gray haze behind the hills. My boots carried me to the edge of the river where I'd let the compass fall. I placed a single daisy there. No speech, no prayer. Just a breath. A moment. Justice didn't roar. It settled. Back at my apartment in Missoula later that week, the mail was waiting. Mostly ads, a power bill, and a certified envelope from the county court. Probate closed. No further contest, no surprises. But tucked inside the same stack was a smaller envelope. No return name. Just a card with a photo, my photo, slipped under plastic. A new image of the family tree display at the Oaks house. This time, my name was penciled in. Faint, like it wasn't supposed to be there, but it was there. Next to it, a small smudge. Faded, like ink that had been wiped and tried again. Someone, maybe my mother, had quietly corrected the story. No apology, no contact, just adjustment. "Some edits come too late," I whispered, "but they still count." And instead of bitterness, I felt air in my chest. A version of release. A rewrite I didn't ask for, but won't undo. I spent that afternoon tidying my apartment. It was small. A studio filled with overwatered plants, crooked bookshelves, and a couch that sunk a little too far in the middle. I liked it. The drawer under the desk held one thing I kept out of sight. Grandpa's original letter, now framed. I took it out. Held it. Read it again like a grounding ritual. Underneath was a blank notebook. I opened the first page and wrote, "Storytelling is a form of remembering," then closed it. The next night, I taught my first writing class in months. Women over 50, most of them retired or divorced or widowed. We met in the back of the library, fluorescent lighting, bad coffee, and honesty. One of the newer students, Lisa, stood up at the end and read a short piece about being invisible at family gatherings. How people asked about her kids but never her. How they remembered her birthday but not who she really was. She sat down with her hands shaking. I walked over and slipped something into her palm. A small brass charm. Round. Simple. Looked like a compass. She looked up. What is this? When they try to erase you, I said, this will remind you where you are. She didn't cry, but she understood, and maybe that was the point. Back home, alone in the quiet, I recorded one last voice memo. Not for an interview, not for the news, just for me. Sometimes, I said, you don't win, but you unburden, and that's enough. I paused, let the room breathe, then spoke one last line. I wasn't the stain. I was the space they left blank because I wouldn't blend in. No applause. Just understanding.